Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Saltworks podcast. I'm so excited to share with you the last episode of 2024. I have on a good friend of mine from high school, actually, Martha Grace Courtright. We talk about the culture of church and making your faith the most important and central thing in your life. We talk about eliminating hurry from your life and learning Sabbath and the waiting seasons that Martha Grace has gone through. She's a mom, she's a wife, and now a doctor. I can't wait for you to hear this conversation. But before we jump into this conversation, I want to tell you about some partners we have for this episode. Office Links is your local authorized technology provider with over 53 years of combined experience. Proudly offering Sharp and Kyocera office equipment, COE and Han office furniture, and anything else you might need down to the smallest office supplies. Whether you need something for your home office or any place of business, Office Links can deliver it with local service and a great price. Call Office Links today to get your estimate at 322-1951. Any additional information can be found on their website at shopofficelinks.com. All right, I know you're still traveling with those holiday parties and errands, and so you need to know about Chevron's loyalty program app. You may have seen people talking on social media getting discounts on gasoline. Well, this is how. It's super easy to set up, and new users will receive 25 cents off per gallon, yes, per gallon, up to 25 gallons for the first 5 uses when you download the app. Plus, each time you're using the app, you are earning 5 points per gallon that can be redeemed for future discounts, ranging from 5 cents to 50 cents, even for additional in-store purchases. Right now, local users are saving 13 cents per gallon. Best part is, the app is completely free and very user-friendly. So what are you waiting for? Go to the App Store on your phone, type in Chevron Rewards, and download the Chevron app to start saving today. It's the busiest season of the year, and medical decisions likely feel like the last thing on your mind. That's why Northeast Imaging wants to make this one choice easy for you. Northeast Imaging is here for any MRI, CT, X-ray, and ultrasound needs you might have. It is a patient-friendly diagnostic testing facility that is doctor-trusted and patient-preferred. They are located at 1703 Lammy Lane here in Monroe. Their friendly staff provides high-quality scans, focusing on the delivery of exemplary care to the patient and their referring providers. Whether you're using your health insurance or just paying cash, Northeast Imaging is almost always more affordable than local hospitals. They're open Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. So take that decision off your list and tell your healthcare provider you want to go to Northeast Imaging. And now I can't wait to share with you this conversation with Martha Grace. Martha Grace, welcome to the Saltworks podcast.
Thank you.
I'm so excited you're here, not just on the podcast, but actually in person.
Yeah.
Which is fun.
Yeah, it's been 2.5 years since I've been back in Monroe.
Has it really?
Yeah.
Wow. Does it feel weird?
It does. It does feel really weird. I feel like every time I come back, it's like, oh yeah, this is so familiar and yet feels very foreign.
Flying in with kids too. How was that?
They did really well.
Yeah.
It went really smoothly.
Good.
I mean, thankfully all the travel went very smoothly, but it was a long day. We left our house at 5 o'clock in the morning and got in at 5 p.m. yesterday. So it was a solid 12 hours of traveling.
And share where your house is, where you'll find.
Yeah, so I am currently living in Hayward, Wisconsin, which is in very northwest Wisconsin.
Yeah.
So it was a drive to an airport and then a flight and then a layover and then another flight to get here. So
and you can tell the closer you're getting to Monroe with the flights. It gets tighter and tighter in this place.
Yeah. I mean, it's a small, but it's nice that we even had the
it really here.
Is. But so it was a long day of travel, but the kids did really, really well and everything went smoothly. So
yeah. Good. Well, it was super fun, and we're super appreciative for you to squeeze us in because you just flew in yesterday and making your notes on the flight like super mom. How did you do that?
Well, there may have been some iPad and some coloring books involved.
For sure. Yeah, that would have been the case for my flight regardless of needing to get work done. Well, for people who don't know you or don't know everything that you're doing right now, who's Martha Grace?
Yeah. So I grew up in Monroe, so that's how you and I, know each other from high school. So I grew up in Monroe, lived here my whole life. I may not sound like it. I was a transplanted Southerner. My parents were not from Louisiana, and lived outside, but I lived here my whole life until I left for college.
Yeah.
So, so I lived in Monroe for, my whole growing up. And my parents still live here,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't anymore and
Mm-hmm.
haven't since I graduated from
Yeah.
high school. So it's kind of a roundabout story to how I ended up in like northern Wisconsin, but the
Yeah.
very brief, which we may get into some of the other pieces. I went to a school outside Chicago for college. I went to Wheaton College, which is where I graduated from. It's where I met my husband,
Mm-hmm.
who's from Florida. So we're two transplanted Southerners who
That's
just
awesome.
didn't
I
really.
didn't realize Kyle was from
Yeah,
Florida.
yeah. He grew up in Miami and West Palm Beach.
Okay.
Yeah, but neither one of us really wanted to move back south. And we just keep moving further and further north, much
That's
to all of our like
hilarious.
family's chagrin.
I can
So,
remember like your Snapchats and like you're walking in the snow
oh
out to see
yeah,
the
oh
animals
yeah,
and we're like
oh yeah.
wearing short
Yes,
sleeves
I
that
know.
day.
I know. I mean, right now it's like sitting on the back porch, like where we ate lunch. I was like, okay, see, I would live in Louisiana right now. It's
Yeah,
really like June through like September that I'm
for
like,
sure. Me
I have
too.
no interest
We need to
whatsoever.
do like how they used to do back in England, like we
Yes,
summer over
yes, you go
here
to
and then
Bath for
yes.
whatever. Yes.
How we just need some time share,
I really, I mean, there's several reasons why I didn't want to move back south, but
Yeah.
weather is for sure. It's so people were like, "You're moving to Chicago," and it would be
Mhm.
like, "Beat,
Yeah.
beat." It snows there. And it would be like, "Yeah, I
I'm
do."
not aware.
Yeah. So I met my husband
Yeah.
in college, and we, after graduating, we well, so yeah, so I wanted to go to medical school. I knew that
Mhm.
was the plan. I didn't get into med school the first time. And
Mhm.
so then we sort of had this like, what are we going to do for the interim? And so we ended up we got married right after college. We stayed in Chicago for another like year and a half.
Mhm.
And then he got a job offer in Wisconsin,
Yeah.
and we had, basically just had connections there. So that's how we ended up in Wisconsin. And so then I applied to medical school
Yeah.
through the Wisconsin systems. And so did med school and residency in Wisconsin. And so then at that point, it was sort of, you can go pretty much wherever you wanted. And we sort of had a blank check, but we really liked a lot of things
Hmm.
about Wisconsin. And so
How cool is that?
ended up finding this job
Yeah.
in Northwest Wisconsin. And I do really like the weather. I mean,
Yeah.
like this out here is like, yeah, it is nice to be able to be outside, not like completely bundled up, but
Right.
I never was very good with the heat. I just like don't
Yeah.
handle heat well. And I really actually much prefer it to be cold. You can bundle, whereas when it's hot, you can only take off so much
I
clothing
know. I
until it's no
know.
longer
I'm with
socially
you. Yeah, I'm sold.
acceptable. Yes. And I like, like you can be outside and do like winter stuff. And I like, snowshoeing and skiing and, doing a lot of those, things. And the weather's just really lovely. Um, Even though it is, brutally, cold.
Yeah,
But yeah, anyway, so,
that is cool.
so I like the weather in Wisconsin. Anyway, so yeah, so we've been
Mhm.
living in Wisconsin. I mean, we've been in the Midwest now. I mean, I guess if you consider Chicago is Midwest. I mean, since we started
That
college.
is crazy.
Yeah.
Does
Yeah.
is that surprising when you say out loud it's
Yeah,
been
it does.
that
Yeah,
long?
it does
Yeah.
feel like a really long
Yeah.
time because people say, "Where are you from?" And I don't say
Right.
Wisconsin. Like I'm like from is like where I grew up, And I'm like
Right.
I am from Louisiana. Like
Yeah.
that is true. But
Mhm.
home at this point, I would
And you've
say
never had a Louisiana
no,
accent
I didn't.
because, your
No. No,
parents
people
don't.
would be
Yeah.
like, "Where are you from?" And I'm like, "Here." "No, where are you from?"
Yeah.
Like,
No, really tell
really,
us.
really here. Like I grew up here, but because both my parents grew up in New England
Mhm.
area, they didn't have a
Yeah.
strong drawl, and so I never really did. People always, wonder.
Yeah.
I probably had more of one than I do now, and people, you'll have to tell me. Many people say I now have. My dad thinks that I have Wisconsin.
Yeah. Yo, yeah, I
Like
can
there's
hear
some
it.
like
Yeah.
Wisconsin, some of the nasally, like vowels. He like
That's
laughs at
so
me.
funny.
So,
That's
but
what
I
dads are
still,
for.
yeah, right, yeah. He gives me grief. He's like, that was very Wisconsin. I'm like, okay, thanks. But my husband says when I talk to people, like when I come back south or talk to people in the south,
You
or when I
slip back
get
into it.
emotional, like he's like, you're drawling, and I'm like, oh, like it's like,
So we
you know.
might draw more and more
Yeah,
as we
right.
go
As I'm
on.
here, I've only been here for 24, not even 24 hours, so it's probably not back yet. But I say y'all, I say fixin' to,
Yeah. Oh,
But I
yeah.
mean, I never, um,
I hear
I
it in
never.
the. I hear that.
The
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
oh yeah,
Uh-huh.
man,
Uh-huh. I love it. I love the mix.
Yeah, yeah. So it is a little bit of a hybrid, but I never had a strong. No, that accent. I was never
Yeah.
a really strong Southern accent, but it probably had more than I did. But now I've been in the Midwest for long enough that
Yeah.
it's probably all
That's
like
wild.
gone. Yeah, but even there, they're like, "Where are you from?" Because I think they can tell that and you're just like,
Isn't that
"Whatever."
so funny?
I'll never be from anywhere.
No. Well, because like I taught French for a
Yeah,
little bit. I
yeah.
don't know if I've ever really said that on the podcast, but for a couple years before I had Bear, But I still, like, in college, wasn't planning to do that.
Yeah,
But when I
yeah,
switched majors, I had to take more hours. Well, I was like, well, I love French, was in French club, like that,
yeah,
like
yeah,
was opting to take
yeah.
more hours than I had to senior year, and could have gotten early release, but took French 3 because I was that person.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Right. Yeah. Might as well
And
add some more classes on there.
absolutely. And so whenever I switched at LSU, they put me in French 4, and my teacher was from Senegal,
Mm.
and we had an oral exam in her office for 10 minutes, like completely in French. And, I'm super rusty. It's been
Yeah,
2 years
yeah,
since
because for
I've,
like entrance, yeah, for the
right,
yeah,
been in
yeah.
it. And now I'm in French 4. And so totally, trying to get back into it. A
Hmm.
lot of things you're remembering, a lot of things you're not. But we're talking, and at the end of the exam, it's just the two of us, and
Yeah.
she was like, "Are you from England?" Yeah, so
Oh,
yeah, see, you
so
get this
Madame
because,
Matejski's
yes,
accent. Oh,
Valerie
how funny. Yeah,
Matejski,
yeah, yeah.
our French teacher in high school, was from
From
England.
England, yeah.
Yes,
So
so
she
like,
taught you. You picked
yes,
up on her
I picked
accent.
up French with a British
Oh,
accent.
how
So
funny.
I like to flex that sometimes
Yeah,
because
it's
it's the
like
only
not only
British
do I
accent.
speak
Yeah.
French, not only, and also with a
Fun
British
fact,
accent.
which I don't speak French well, I
Yeah,
should preface that with.
yeah, yeah,
It's really been a while since I've been in it now.
yeah.
Well, okay, so tell us why that was your choice for college going back. Like, why go there?
Yeah. Yeah, so I Wheaton is a Christian college. It's
Mhm.
actually the only Christian college I applied to.
Wow.
Um I have to say that I definitely struggled. Like one of the weather is one reason why
Yeah.
I didn't want to be in the South. That is
Yeah.
true. But the other thing, the kind of cultural Christianity was really hard for me.
Mm.
I'm a pretty like blunt, straightforward person,
Yeah.
and like I want to know where people stand,
Yeah.
and I would much rather that I know that you and I disagree on something, but I
Mhm.
know where you stand,
Yeah. Rather be hot or cold.
Yeah, and it was very difficult to me feeling like there was just like, well, I'm Christian because my grandma's Christian and she's
Mhm.
sending me to this school and
Mhm.
expecting me to, go to church, but it didn't really like seem to matter in a lot of people's lives.
Yeah.
And so I just, because I had gone to several like Christian schools and that had been my experience, not to a fault, not every single person,
Right.
but I'm just, the general gist is how I felt. I was like, well, I don't want to go to a Christian school, then I want
Mm.
to go to a non-Christian school where I can get involved with the Christian ministry, but people aren't there because they like have to be,
Right. Right.
and then I know where people stand.
Yeah.
So, I didn't know anything about Wheaton. I mean, it has a very good, reputation
Mhm.
as a like solid Christian school. Oh, so let me say the other reason that I didn't want to go to Christian schools. A lot of Christian schools, education is less the like priority, and I knew I
Yeah.
wanted to go to med school, and I was like,
Right.
I have to go somewhere where the education is going to mean something because there's
Yeah.
no Christian like med school. You know what I mean? So I
Right.
need to go
Right.
somewhere where that degree means something.
Yes.
And that wasn't the only priority, but it's like that's why you go to college, right? Is to
Right.
get a
Yeah.
degree.
Well, especially when
Yeah,
you know what the next
right.
step
Like
is.
I
I mean, a lot of
wanted,
people don't,
right, and I knew that's what I wanted to do. I mean, I knew there was a chance that's what was going to happen, but I wanted to set myself up. So
Right.
I just wasn't sure that there was going to be a school that like where people were really going to be like taking their faith
Mhm.
seriously. And but what my mom had suggested, well, why don't we? She'd heard of Wheaton. She liked the reputation. She was like, what if we did like you can go and spend the night with like one of the freshmen? Like
Mhm.
I don't remember what Wheaton
Yeah.
Connection, I think is what ours was called. I can't remember what it was called. And so we like spent, so I went and it's this freshman and I was like, oh
Mhm.
my goodness, like this is a group of people who are like intelligent,
Mhm.
Christians, care about their faith and are not
Yeah.
here because they have no choice, like they actually like care
Right.
about like their faith. I was like, okay, well, if that such a place
Yeah.
which I didn't think it did, I was like, well,
Mm.
I guess that's where I want to go.
Yeah.
And I'm not, saying it's the only one, I'm sure that
Yeah.
there are other like Christian schools, but I guess just my experience in like the Bible Belt and Southern culture was just
Mhm.
that it was very cultural, but didn't actually like mean something in your life. And I was just
Yeah.
kind of done with that. I just really wanted to know where people stood.
Yeah.
And so again, like if you aren't a believer, fine, but at least we like know where we stand and
Right.
I can, be
Mm.
able to, engage.
I love that though for two reasons. One, that's really what we're most passionate about with the Saltworks is
Yeah.
like, hey, do you know why you're here in this hour? Like people of the church,
Right.
are you living that? Are you boldly living that? Is that your
Right.
first thing? And so that's become the vision for the podcast is like spurring people on to do that, whatever corner of the world you're in,
Yeah.
whatever
Yeah.
walk of life you're in. what does that look like for you, and getting to hear people's stories. But I also love it because I knew you then,
Mm-hmm.
and you have just always been someone who sees.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're driven, but not to a fault.
Mm-hmm.
Like you see things and it holds value, not because it's going to create your identity,
Mm-hmm.
but because you're like, no, like these are the things I value. And it, like most people in their 40s, you know,
Right,
are
like
still trying to
late,
figure that out. Yeah. And I mean, I'm lumping myself in there with that. Like I get it.
Yeah, I was an old soul. I was kind of glad when I
Yes.
got to like end of 20s, and it was okay that I didn't really like have to be
No.
like, I was like, I never really wanted to like party and just like, this is what I want to do, but it was more socially acceptable
No,
to
I
not do
loved
those
it.
things at a certain point.
Some of me and Andrew's like favorite memories was like random nights at your parents' house. Like, you know,
playing board games, hanging out.
yes, yeah. And like I think we had Easter dinner there one night, you know, and just like the tradition that y'all had, like y'all just, I love the family culture that you came from, because y'all were a family culture. You weren't culture first and then family. Y'all were a unit who went out into the world, and that's really like you were given a basis of what Christianity is supposed to look like, and I feel like so many aren't, you know. And so like we talk about your family often, and I'm you too, you know. And so I love that. And,
I didn't go away because I don't love my family.
No,
like, I love my family.
No.
I would love them. You know, I'm trying to get them to come to Wisconsin. Otherwise, I'll come and, you know, visit here. No, I love my family. And I loved a lot of things about, my growing up. Yeah, I just really wanted to, you know, I wanted to go somewhere that was, that I felt like I could, you know, it would be easier, I guess, to like find people who had
well,
like
and now we know why you did, because it led to
my
your
marriage,
I mean,
so many
children,
those,
your
like,
job,
exactly. God clearly had a plan.
Tell us about meeting Kyle.
So we met freshman year, but he was dating still a high school girlfriend, you know, so there was no, you know, nothing there. I really, you know, the very stereotypical Christian college thing is you go for your MRS degree, you're going to find your husband. That was so not me, you know, like it chafes me a little bit that I met my husband freshman year, started dating him sophomore year, got engaged junior year, and got married summer after senior year, which
honestly,
is the quintessential.
I get that too, because I was more like ambition driven. Like I didn't dream of the way things happened. I'll say it that way.
Yeah, like the quintessential Christian college thing, and I was like, that was not me.
You can tell us, Martha Grace. You can tell us. No,
So, because I knew I wanted to go to med school, and so I was like, why would I try to do marriage and, you know, a med school at the same time? No guy wants to deal with that, you know, like what guy in his right mind?
That's not true. But
well, I mean, it just felt to me like, you know, like this is what I want to do, and I guess like no guy would just want to like come along. So we started dating sophomore year, and then got engaged junior year and got married summer after senior year. And so at this point, so we got married in 2013. So this past summer was our 11th, you know, anniversary. So we've been married. So we got married young, you know, and he's, you know, been just an incredible, support through this whole like process. I think I think my mom had been on this, you know, the podcast like a while ago. So some of you may be familiar. May be familiar with her. But so both my parents are physicians. So I definitely saw like what they did.
Right.
Knew what I was getting into when it came to the like educational, you know, rigor that it was, which is, I mean, basically, I mean, it's like 10 plus years, you know, depending on like what you do.
And then a lifelong learner.
And then a lifelong. Yes, exactly. And so, you know, they really wanted to make sure that he knew what he was getting into, especially when we were like dating. It was like funny.
Are you
yes,
sure?
Are you sure that you know, like
Thanks
you may
so
not
much,
ever.
Mom and
yes, exactly. Sometimes I was like, okay, like you know, I do want to marry him, you know, like you don't have to talk him out of it, right? But I mean, he's been a really good sport. It's not easy to be a medical spouse, especially medical like training, you know, and he had to sacrifice like a lot of like what he was necessarily like wanting to do, and there was a lot of things that I had no control, you know, over. So I did not get into med school the first time. I think I said that earlier, and so that was, you know, that was really the first like true failure, probably. I mean, because I was academically pretty you know, gifted, you know, and pretty much if I applied for something, I got it, and that was sort of my experience until I didn't get into med school, and I applied to a good number. I mean, it's a really competitive, process. And so then it was like, okay, well, like now what? And this is what I've been working
Yeah.
towards. And
I
yeah,
remember getting lunch with you, I think, like,
hmm
when that was
probably around that
happening.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It was very hard. It was
Yeah.
like, okay, like if this isn't what you have for me, God, then what is? Because there'd been
Mhm.
nothing else that had really like grabbed me.
Yeah.
And I mean, we got married the week before we got married was the when I got the last letter that I had been
Mm.
like waitlisted, and then they like took me off the wait list like in the bad way, like in
Mm.
the you're not accepted way, right? So that was the
Yeah.
week before we got married. And so then we're like we get married in June and we're poised to potentially be starting med school in the
Right.
fall. But then that was the last one. And so then, we went off, we got married, we did our honeymoon. I mean, we had a great summer, but then it was like, what are we going to do?
Right.
Like it was, and so that was really like definitely the first like failure that I'd had. And so it was, and plus doing like first year of marriage and figuring out, like
Yeah.
what are we,
Especially when your plans that you were working towards. And I want to
right.
say this too, actually going into it with this is what I feel called to do,
Mm.
to me, that is the proper way that we should be going into
Right.
marriage. And like the way that you had to say, well, this is what I feel like the Lord has given me. I've
Hmm.
seen this. I've seen my parents walk this out. I have this heart for
Right.
this. I know this is where I'm headed, or I believe this is where I'm headed,
Mm.
because this our calling, whatever that looks like with the Lord, should be the first thing, and then you get to come alongside someone in
Right.
companionship.
Right.
And a lot of times we think like marriage is for my fulfillment, then I pick my job, and
Right.
that's just
Yeah.
not what marriage is. Now it's this covenant that the
Right.
Lord's given
Right.
us. But I think that's such a cool way for it to start, like even joking about your parents being like, do you know? But truly, like we all need more
Right,
questions
right.
like that before
Well,
we
I
get
mean,
married.
many medical training marriages don't last. I mean,
Wow.
I don't know what the exact numbers are,
Yeah.
but many of them don't. And then in those like early years, like after,
Yeah.
like there's, I'm sure the stereotype, oh, well, you got the doctor spouse and then,
Yeah.
like paycheck. And I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, like it's a, but it's like the training is like no fun. I mean, you
Yeah.
basically like don't, like you don't have your spouse for a good number of those years. There's
Mhm.
very, and it's funny, when I like made the joke about, oh, well, like what guy would want to like do this? And I don't need a man, or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's like looking back, I'm like, I don't know how I would have done it without him.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
he kept like the home fires like burning, kept things
Mhm.
like functioning. I mean, and he does it,
Yeah.
now too, because it's my, even though I'm out of training, I still have a pretty, often
Mm.
um, a job that will pull me away,
Yeah.
from things.
Yeah.
Um,
I
yeah,
want to ask, what did that how did your relationship with the Lord look in that season of what you describe as feeling
like
like failure?
feeling like failure and
Yeah.
waiting. Yeah, I mean, it was hard. It was a lot of me like feel like like what am I supposed to do with this like not yet, like
Mhm.
answer. And is it a not yet? Is it a no? Like should I be,
Right.
like looking for another,
Mhm.
like should I be looking at another career? Because if
Mhm.
that's what you're wanting me to, but there's nothing else that's grabbing me.
Mhm.
And so, it was definitely sort of like learning about that loss of control, which, I'm a pretty type A,
Mhm.
like to have my ducks in a row kind of person. It's hard to get through medicine without being that kind of,
Mhm.
person.
Yeah.
And so it's like I've got a plan, and so that period of like waiting
Yeah.
and like what is my like vision, what is my plan. But like now looking back, it's like we had then 2 years of marriage under our belt
Right.
starting med school
Right.
instead of having 2 weeks or something like that, 2 months,
But I love that you're saying that, because like parts of our conversation are coming back now, and I'm not saying anything that would be outside of your confidence, I don't think. But like I can remember, I think I might have been would I have been pregnant with Bear, or maybe we had had the first miscarriage when we had lunch, and you were even talking about, I mean, like,
it would have been
when am I going to be able to
2013.
have children?
Yeah.
Like
Oh, yeah,
you're
yeah,
thinking
yeah, like
like
ahead. Yeah, yeah,
not
yeah.
only like am I having this waiting period, but that pushes all of these things that I think are going to look like this back,
Right.
And
Yeah.
so even to hear you say this many years down the line, like, oh, that gave us 2 years of marriage, which is a big
Yeah.
deal,
Right.
this foundation. And so that's a neat, I don't know, it's just cool to see it from that perspective. So, what do you feel like was the benefit of y'all like, how did you see that play out? Y'all had these 2 years of marriage,
Yeah, I
and now
think
you're
having had some years of marriage under our belt was really
yeah,
key. I mean, would we have not survived otherwise? I don't know, but I mean, it
yeah.
was to be able to have like some years. I mean, first year of marriage for us was pretty hard,
Mhm.
I think, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it was just you're figuring out how to like live with somebody,
Yeah.
and financially things were extremely tight, and
Mhm.
it was like, yeah. I mean, it was hard. It was like a lot of
Mhm.
like learning stuff. So I think that was really, yeah, beneficial. And then, where I was applying to med school
Yeah.
was Louisiana. I
Mhm.
applied to some in Tennessee, which is where Kyle's family, now lives. But I wasn't applying anywhere in Wisconsin, and so we would not have, I mean, I'm sure if I had gotten into med school the
Right.
first time, I would not have ended up there. The med school I ended up going to, it was actually its first year. It's like a regional campus, so it's like the main campus was in existence, but it was a regional campus that I went to, which was beneficial in a lot of ways. One is that it's a 3-year like accelerated,
Mm,
and so because it's primary care focused is the other thing. And I
gotcha.
wanted to do primary care. I knew I wanted to do primary care,
Yeah.
and so it like really was the perfect program,
Yeah.
for me. And so, like, I mean, it was clear that this is where like God wanted me. I mean, I would not be where I'm at, obviously,
Right.
otherwise. Now, where would I be? I don't know. Sometimes
Right.
you can go through like the thought experiment of like, what it have been like, and I don't know. But I mean, it, taught me a lot of things. And, there's a lot of, I think a lot of, I'm not saying that I've learned the lesson entirely of like how to not be in control, but I
Yeah.
feel like
I'm
that's
still waiting
less.
on that lesson to
Yes,
totally
I
set
feel
in.
like that's less the lesson that God's like pounding into me right now than it was
Being on the
for,
podcast.
yeah, yeah, right. Yes. I mean, it was a big lesson
Yeah.
for me for, yeah, probably
Yeah.
from like, early, late college or, those early years until,
Mhm.
and again, still definitely have
Mhm.
times that I want to be like in control of like the plan. So it's not
For
perfect, but it
sure.
was like a good number of years there,
Right.
because the other really thing where I was like losing control, which we had,
Mhm.
talked about some, is we had two miscarriages when I was
Mm.
in one in med school and one in residency. And that was another
Mhm.
thing that I was like, okay, God, like
Yeah.
you've put like being a mother like on my,
Yeah.
heart.
Yeah.
And I've already like waited, not, I mean, I'm not even that old now, but like I knew that, like
Yeah.
at that point we'd been married for like 7 years, and
Mhm.
and I knew that I needed to get through training, but then to be like after all that, and now I'm like,
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
to, deal with like the both the, emotional difficulties of miscarriage, which were
Mhm.
incredibly difficult for me,
Mhm.
much more difficult than I frankly thought it
Yeah.
was going to be if I would have,
Yeah.
um, because like medically, I would say, oh yeah, I know that a good number of
Yeah.
pregnancies like end
But
in like
there's just
miscarriage, but then
no
here I am, like I've only known about this pregnancy for 3 weeks, and I'm like completely devastated.
no,
Like
I
there's an
that's how
attachment.
ours was as well. And it's you I mean, we didn't even get to hear a heartbeat, but
Yeah,
there's just this deep grieving
yeah,
of
just like life you thought was going to be. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
and like with it being your first,
Hmm.
you're I'm not downplaying if it's, your second
Yeah,
child, but
yeah.
like am I going to be a
Could I
mom?
ever be a mom?
Yeah,
Right,
like there's this
exactly. Yeah,
question of will this even be a part of my life?
right,
And so there's just a lot of grieving there that like reason can't totally satisfy, you
right.
know?
Yeah, yeah. You like come up with all these plans in just those like couple
Yeah.
weeks, and
How
then you
far
realize,
apart were those?
um one was the first miscarriage was, yeah, they were within the same year.
Year. Mm,
It was like the end of my 3rd year of med school, my last year of med school, because again I did a
yeah.
accelerated, and then early in my intern
Mm,
year. And so that was the other hard part, is it was like I worked through them,
mm.
like it's like,
Martha Grace, how did you do that?
I mean, I mean, I'm sure that if I had said to my attendings,
Yeah.
hey, I'm, bleeding and
Yeah.
cramping and
Yeah.
hurting and, would like to go, I'm sure they wouldn't have like
Mhm.
fired me, or
Mhm.
failed me, but you don't feel like you have
Mhm.
a choice, and some to a certain extent, sometimes it's easier just to keep like working and
Yeah.
like distracting yourself. So like to a certain extent, like that's
Right.
true. But that was sort of loss of control lesson 2.0,
Yeah.
is like, this isn't something that, I have control over, like
Mhm.
ultimately, but then the lesson that I think God was teaching me there, I really do think that having miscarriages changed how I mother, changed how I
Mm.
parent. I know that it did, because I just remember, I mean, especially, so then with Izzy's with the pregnancy of my
Yeah.
first child that, I had
Yeah.
successfully had, that was a very anxiety producing pregnancy for me
I
for
was
many
gonna
ways,
say, yeah.
because it was just kind of like
You're
I
waiting for that
couldn't
ball to
I
drop.
couldn't get it took
Mhm.
me a long time to get
Mhm.
excited.
Yes.
Um I was because of the year that it was in residency, I was on the labor and delivery floor like quite a bit. And
Mm.
so seeing some like hard things too, right?
Mm.
Like there
Yeah.
was like a distinct memory of I was about 20 weeks along, which is sort of where you're like, okay, like we're almost
Yeah,
viable,
I can
whatever.
breathe a little
I can
bit.
breathe a little, and in comes a like 20-week demise. And
Mm.
I just remember being like, I want to run as far away
Yeah.
from this like hospital as I can. I could, I was like no
Yes.
longer an objective, like physician. I couldn't, it's like, this was not, I was like, I am done, like I
Yeah.
want to leave like right now. And I was the senior resident. I'm supposed to be helping, the intern,
Yeah.
whatever. And I was like, how far away from this like room can I like be? Because it was just like, it felt like somehow I mean, not like it made logical sense, but it was like,
Yeah.
no, like I'm supposed to be able to feel like,
Right.
take a breath of relief here,
Yeah.
and it's like, but then I think as like that pregnancy went on, because then, COVID hit. My Izzy
Yeah.
was born April of 2020. So it was
Wow.
like my last month of pregnancy was the like insanity that was COVID and the fear that was, like around
Yeah.
all of that. And,
So
but,
was your family able to come?
mom came up, but she couldn't see me in the hospital.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I was trying to
And
think like flights even. I couldn't think back
I
to.
think she drove
Okay.
because of fear.
Yeah.
Well, not necessarily, but because of like yeah, I think she
What if you
drove.
got stuck and
Yeah,
you
what if
can't
you
get
got stuck,
home?
or
Yeah.
what if,
So
like
true.
she just,
Brings
yeah,
germs. New
yes,
baby.
exactly. Yeah, to a new, yeah, exactly. So I
There's a
mean,
lot of unknown.
I think she ended up, she drove,
Yeah.
and she was there for like a month, which was
Mm,
amazing. She was
yeah.
like so helpful. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, first baby, just nuts, right?
Oh my
So,
goodness. Yeah.
but I mean, even though that was like a stressful time, how I think it changed my mothering
Mm-hmm.
was like, well, it's not like you actually have a whole lot more control once
Mm-hmm.
they're out of you. It's
Yeah.
sort of like a semblance of control,
Right.
because like, they're not just going to be some like horrible thing that happens in utero, but there's still all kinds of things that could happen.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be a
And with a
helicopter.
medical
You
background,
know
that
all the
you
things
know
that
too
it could be,
much.
right?
It's
Yeah.
hard. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, I don't want to live my life,
Right.
as this like anxious helicopter parent, and I'm not
Yeah.
an anxious person. I'm really not, but I'm like, I like, this child has been given to me,
Mm-hmm.
entrusted to me for
Mm-hmm.
however long God
Yeah.
is giving them to me.
No, my friends that are in the medical field, whether doctor, nursing, whatever, they are like, I can't be objective with my
Yeah,
kids.
yeah, yeah.
Like I need you to look at
Yes,
them because
yes.
I know too much.
Right. It's like I go to worst case
Yeah, for
scenario, like is
sure.
my
Yeah.
total instinct. Well, I mean, as a child of two doctors, it was sort of the joke. You got sort of ignored, like, oh, like rub some dirt in it, you're fine.
Your
It's not
arms
the worst
hanging
I've ever
off.
seen.
Yeah.
Until their like alarms went off, and then all of a sudden they were like, oh, like, and then you were like in, and you were getting all this stuff. You know what I mean? There was no in between. It was either you're fine, rub
Yes.
some dirt in it, or like,
It's an
oh my goodness,
emergency.
it's an emergency, and then they would make it like
Yeah.
happen, right? Yes, exactly. I know. So I'm sure that I do that sometimes. Like, you're fine.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I just like, I don't want, yeah, I mean, for however long, and it
Mm-hmm.
could be that there would be a horrible, something that would
Yeah.
happen, like a diagnosis or an accident or like whatever. And I can't live my life just like worrying
Well,
about
and
like
like
what
their
those things are.
choices,
Right. Yeah. Yes.
like
And then,
the emotional, the
right.
spiritual, like that control, like that's a large part of what my book is about. Is like you know, you can put in all of this time, you can teach them the right things, but you ultimately can't make their choices.
No.
And why should that mean you're not a good
Right.
mom?
Right. Right.
Because with the Christian faith, it's all about the input,
Mm-hmm.
not the outcome.
Right.
And that's the part we want to, that's the controllable part that we want to hold is the outcome, but that's not what he's given us,
Right.
And it's the same in motherhood. But like how amazing was that for you to realize before she got here, essentially?
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, I still have days
Yeah,
that it's not
you're
perfect,
fixed, you're cured.
yeah, it's not like cured, but I just think that like that it's how it changed that experience, those experiences like changed how I mother,
Mm,
because it was like, these are gifted to me. Like I didn't know if I was going to be able to be
yeah,
a parent, or
yeah,
not, and then it's like, despite all of this, like this, and I have them for whatever
yeah,
period of time that I do. And yeah, I'm doing my best, some
yeah.
days my best doesn't look great,
I
you
get that.
know,
I get that.
but I'm, and then, yeah, and we're not even to the teenage years where I'm
Mm,
sure like it'll be a whole nother like lesson in loss of
for
control,
sure.
because I have a lot of like bodily control right now,
Yeah.
but like, yeah, but it's like, that's why it goes in stages, right? They grow like slowly, right?
Yes, the
So,
Lord is gracious to
yes,
us.
exactly.
We
You don't just get handed a 3-year-old, right?
I know we laughed because when Bear was born, he was 5 weeks early,
Mm.
so he was 412, didn't have to go to the NICU.
Wow.
What in the world?
Yeah.
Only Bear die.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Just by sheer
Yeah,
will.
wimpy white male
Yes,
didn't
I was
need
gonna say that's typically not the case.
no. And so and he's been doing his own thing since, but he so he's so tiny. I mean, and I can remember being at my parents and my sister's kids who are about my kids' ages now,
Yeah, yeah,
maybe a little
yeah,
younger. Um one of them was like, "Are you going to put him down to run around?" Like, we laughed so hard. It's like, "Thank you, Lord,
yeah, yeah.
that they don't run
They don't
yet."
start moving. Yes, yes, exactly. Yeah, no, that's what I tell my like patients. I'm like, we don't, like you got some time before they're like moving. You can figure it out.
Yes.
You don't have to baby proof quite yet,
Yeah.
but so
But I mean, but even just hearing that, Martha Grace, like what a cool physician, like, but seriously, like just to have that wisdom and that kindness and grace that you have because you get it.
yeah,
You've walked it,
yeah,
like, and as much as many days you wish you hadn't felt that pain, you get that mom
for
that
sure.
comes in and is like, I'm anxious all the time,
Yep, yep,
and like you get it,
yeah. Oh,
and
for sure, being a parent has made me a significantly better
I
physician,
mean, yeah.
significantly better. I mean, not that you can
No,
be a good physician and not be a mother, but yes, to be like, this is what worked for me. This isn't
yeah,
like, to get where it's at, like
but
struggling
that
with breastfeeding, like I'm
compassion.
totally there with you, like, or,
Yes.
like, and I do prenatal care. I mean, I do deliveries, I do OB
Yeah.
care. And so like, I deal with people, like women who are having miscarriages, and
Yeah.
yeah, it makes me,
Mm.
it not that you can't understand if you haven't been in it, but it brings another layer
It
there.
is, and there are some things about those emotions that you really can't name unless you've walked it.
Yeah.
It just is. I mean, it's like loss. It's like it's grief. It is grief.
Hmm.
And so you don't really know until you know.
Yeah.
Um so okay, getting into motherhood. I love how you laid that out and just so beautiful. I mean, we need to remember that in all parts of life. So tell us a little bit about okay, you've got you now have two
Yes.
not
Yes.
babies
Yeah.
anymore, but
No, not
two
anymore.
I'm sure active
Very active.
healthy
Yep. Yep.
children.
Yep. Izzy's 4.5, and then Liam will be 3
Yeah.
in next month. Yep. So
So fun.
yeah, so Izzy was born end of my second year of residency,
Mhm.
and then Liam was born very like I like 2 months into my new job, which was
Oh
a
my
little bit
goodness.
not exactly our planned timing. So
Yeah.
yeah, they're pretty close in age.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell us how that looked with school and work and job and then with Kyle.
Yeah. Yeah. So when we were my plan was always to work, and I'm not saying that you can't do medicine and then decide to be like a stay-at-home parent, but I was like, if I'm going to do all this school,
Mhm.
like I'm doing it for,
Yeah.
like for a reason, and this is what I want to do. I also don't think I'm not well suited, I don't think, to stay at home like
I wasn't
parent.
either.
Like, I know that's what every stay-at-home parent says. They're like, I wasn't either. I'm like,
There's
okay, fine,
no
I hear you.
such
But
thing.
Kyle is much better
Yeah. But I
suited,
get
like
it because I couldn't
personality.
do medicine.
Yeah,
So
yeah, right.
yeah.
Kyle is much better suited to a stay-at-home parent life
Mm,
than I am.
yeah.
He's just much more okay with a day that
Yeah.
doesn't have necessarily like structure and
Yeah.
plan, and he's like just an extremely flexible person. And but he wasn't always like sure that's what he wanted. It was several years of us talking about it before he
Mm,
decided that. So he is now the stay-at-home parent. I don't know if I said that, but like
yeah.
he stays home like with the kids. He is the, you know I don't know, I've heard primary parent. I don't know if that's like totally, I mean, like I parent,
Yeah, I was gonna, yeah.
but he, when it worked out well in that he sort of,
Mhm.
the job that he was in was no longer really an option. He wasn't fired, but there was just some things that
Mm.
happened. The job was no longer an option pretty much whenever
Mhm.
he
Yeah.
right after Izzy was born. And so we had talked about, would you want to do part-time or whatever, and then it just didn't really like make sense. And so he like
Yeah.
stayed home. But once he decided that that's what he wanted to do,
Yeah.
he's like fully embraced it, and he like just
Yeah.
has like he rocks it, and he does an amazing job, and he does,
That
he
is
keeps things
awesome.
like functioning at home. And often I get called in for a delivery or whatever, and I just like know that I don't have to like worry about it. Like I
Yeah.
have a lot of friends who like don't feel like they can go away for a weekend because they're not sure
Mhm.
that their husband can take care of things. Now, on the
Yeah.
one hand, I say to them, like, don't you think they really, don't you think they'd
Yeah.
probably do better than you,
Yeah.
like think that they
Yeah.
would, but I mean, often he's the one, I'm like, where is the thing? I don't know where that thing is because,
Yeah.
he's the one who's sort of taking care of that like stuff.
Yeah.
He's like, does all of the like cooking. He does all of like grocery shopping, meal planning. I mean, he's, amazing.
Mm.
And I mean, I do my best to be like helpful,
Yeah.
like at home when I can be. Yeah, so he it just like what made the most sense,
Yeah.
for like where we're at. And it's like definitely he's
Mhm.
loves it too,
Yeah.
like it's and that was cool to
Yeah.
see because he had quite a few jobs, before that, and he liked some and not quite a few. It sounds like he was a serial like jumper.
Yeah.
But I mean he like had,
Well, yeah, because
part
y'all
of because we
moved
kept having to
too.
move, right?
Right.
So yes, he did have quite a few jobs, but it was mostly my fault. Because we kept having to like move somewhere else for the next set of like training or whatever. And he loved it. He loves like
Yeah.
being a stay-at-home like parent. It's like very well suited for
Mm.
him. But we moved to a really, really small town,
Mhm.
like really small town, only a couple thousand people. It's
Yeah.
got a bigger like catchment, but the town
Mm.
itself is pretty small. And that was a big concern, with moving after residency. Like, is he going to be able to find his like people,
Right.
with being a stay at home, because it's not
It's
definitely
not
not
as
it's not the
common. Right.
traditional, like model,
Yeah.
and so like, and he really has, and really, there's a couple other stay at home dads. And so that's nice.
Mm.
But also like people seem to,
Yeah.
like accept it, just fine.
Yeah.
So yeah, so we I work full time. I do full spectrum medicine, so which includes OB care, right? So that's like the
Mhm.
hard part about that is that you can't always predict when babies are going to come. So a
Yeah.
lot of my life is sort of like, well, yeah, I'll hopefully be there, but I've got somebody due around that time. I mean,
Yeah.
and so definitely some like flexibility things are difficult there. Yeah, and so um
I don't wanna cut you
no,
off
you're
if you
good.
had something else, but so you mentioned, it because it's not the traditional thing, and I do know a couple, but it's newer,
Yeah, yeah,
and I mean, Andrew is this super hands-on dad, and so it's there was a point where I was like, I feel like, I mean, I'm a stay-at-home mom,
mhm,
and I would feel guilty because I am going to visit my friend on the
mhm,
weekend,
mhm,
and totally he has it in hand,
yeah,
but I didn't have a whole lot of people around me that did that,
yeah,
or and
yeah.
so it was just kind of like, am I, a bad mom because I
'Cause
feel
I want a
okay with
break.
this?
Yeah, like
Yeah.
walking away. Yeah,
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 or I
yeah.
want to just go see my friend and not, do the kids and friend thing or whatever. Um, what have you, like, how have you combated some of those things, and what
Yeah.
have you wrestled with that as far as your role as a mom?
Yeah, it's a continual conversation. I mean, it's lots of conversations,
Yeah.
right? Because I really want, he's home with the kids all day. And so
Yeah.
I like know that he needs a break and I know
Mhm.
that he needs space to like do his like
Mhm.
hobbies and things that he enjoys. But I'm
Yeah.
also like toasted when I come home
Yeah.
often too, right? But also he's pretty extroverted and sort of like wants to go do things and I'm sort of like, no, no, I really
Mhm.
want to,
Yeah.
like just like be home and be in this
Yes,
like
been
space.
extroverting all day.
Yes, exactly. And so like I sort of need a break. And so, it's a lot of it's just like conversations about like
Mhm.
like where are you at? Okay, like this is something that you would like to do. Like he's got hobbies and things that he really enjoys and I can like support that. Okay, I'm feeling sort of, you know, um tired and worn out. I don't know. You've heard of Brene Brown probably, or
That
maybe
sounds really
she's done a lot
familiar.
of she's written some books, she's done some like speaking. I bring her up because she has this like marriage thing that she like suggested. I heard it from her. I don't know if
Yeah.
she came up with it where they like she and her husband do like what's your um gives their percentage, right? Like I've got, I'm at, so if you're together, you make 100%, right? Like
Mhm,
I'm at
mhm.
like the most I have to give right now, like I'm at 50, I've got you, I can like cover,
Yeah,
what I mean. I'm probably not explaining this very well,
yeah,
but where it's like in a way to kind of like gauge like where you're at. Whereas other
yeah.
times it's like I am at like 10%, I have nothing. And then the
Yes.
partner is like, doesn't have the extra, like
Yes, I can't go
90%,
90,
I can't go
yeah.
90. And so that's when you know that you need to like pause and kind of figure out,
Right.
and so that's like, we don't always use that language, but sort of like how much do I have
That's
to
your
like cover
gauge.
you, like where are we at here? And so
Mhm,
that's like I when I heard that I was like, oh, I really like that. And so we don't always use the
mhm,
percentages, but sort of like, yes, I feel like I can like,
mhm.
come home from work and then cover you for you to be able to go like do this
Right.
thing.
Yeah.
Um and then we do a lot of things together, and
Mhm.
as like a family,
Yeah.
and I think that that's like, honestly, if there's like one piece of like marriage advice that I would have is like marry somebody who you like get along with and
Mhm.
like can be friends with like
Yes.
outside of your marriage. And if you have like similar interests,
Mhm.
like that'll get you a long way through the marriage like
Yeah.
fights and all the things that you're gonna have to do. But it's like if you can have like fun together and enjoy like similar things,
Yes.
and
Because
so
every moment's not romantic,
right.
but you
Yeah.
can be best friends.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I agree.
Um, yeah, so I mean, a lot of days I feel like we're just sort of making it up as we go along. So that's why when you had asked about this podcast, I was like, does somebody want to hear about, oh yeah, I'm just barely surviving every
Yes, they
day. You know
do
what I
because they
mean?
are in it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I feel like it's, there are many days that I feel like I have failed at everything that I've done. I like
Mm,
didn't get all my like, notes done at work. I got
mhm.
home and I wasn't able to be present with my kids.
Yeah.
I didn't do like the other obligations that I've been like, like committed to. I wasn't a very like kind wife to my,
Mhm.
I haven't called my mom in a week. You know what I mean? It's just like there's, I'm
Yes.
not doing it, but I'm doing my best.
Yeah.
But I think the other, I mean, the big, so we talked about sort of loss. I feel like if,
Right.
if I had to talk about like, the 8 years of through like med school, like
Mhm.
residency, like early motherhood, it was like loss of control and figuring out that.
Mhm.
And I feel like what God's been teaching me over the last couple years is about like creating space. And I don't know
Mhm.
if you've read the book Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. I just read it recently.
No, I've been reading his newest book.
His newest
Yeah,
book.
yeah,
Yeah,
but I have
I'm
not.
also reading his newest book
Yeah.
right now because I had
Is
well,
it
it's
Following the
called
Way?
Practicing
Practicing the Way.
Practicing the Way.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so by John Mark Comer.
Mhm.
So Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, I would say it was a very, very good book. I
Yeah.
mean, I really like Practicing the Way. They're two different,
Yes.
they're two different books, right? And so what was really cool about like Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, I just
Mhm.
read it a couple months ago, but it's sort of like what I've been like thinking about for the last
Yeah.
like couple of years and sort of like
Right.
ruminating over. And finally it's like, okay, this is
It
sort of
put it
like
in
putting in
this.
this. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a very practical book, which I like because a lot of like self-help books are just sort of like, here's the
Mhm.
problem and you should
Mhm.
fix it. And it's like, how do I fix this? Right.
Yeah.
Because we'd spent so many years like between like med school and residency. I mean, life was chaos. And then I
Mhm.
had, like a not even 1 year old and then a new
Yeah.
baby and a new job. And we'd moved. I mean, it was just, I was literally barely surviving.
Yeah.
And I, but a lot of through those years, I didn't have a ton of control,
Mhm.
like I didn't get to choose
Yeah.
where I go. I mean, residency is like you sort of get told where you need to go and then you get given a schedule and you're sort of like, this is what you need to do. And yes, we chose to have like a baby in that too, but
Yeah.
I mean, there was like not a lot of like control. But then what I was finding, I was like, okay, I've graduated. Like, we've gotten through the first year of life for, Liam, which I feel like the first year is like just a huge like hurdle. You're like, okay, like they've
Yeah.
survived. And now
There
like,
is a sigh of
yes, like, okay.
collective relief at age
Yes,
1.
exactly. I have made it through. They haven't died,
That's
they are
right.
now like mobile,
Can
like
mostly eat off what we're
yes,
eating,
exactly.
like
Yeah. I mean, that's how I felt with both of my kids. It was like you got to one,
Yes.
you're like, okay,
Yeah.
and but then like life hadn't slowed down, and I
Mhm.
just kept sort of like thinking like, okay, life is supposed to slow down
Yeah.
now,
And now there's 2.
and now there's two,
Yeah.
but it's like I've gotten through med school, I've gotten through residency, I've gotten through,
Mhm.
like those first couple years of like practice. Like it is time for things to slow down now and like
Yeah.
realizing that they weren't. And it's because I wasn't saying no to things,
Yeah.
because I'm very bad at saying no to good things.
Well, it's like, yeah, yeah. It's also like life forced you to live outside of your capacity to some extent. And so it's kind of like you get to a season after survival mode and fill in the blanks. Like if you've had a baby, you've lived outside of your
Yes, yes,
capacity.
exactly. Yes.
For the delivery even.
Right, right, right.
But then the getting up in the night and all of the things, and you're constantly pouring up what you don't have.
Right.
And there's a lot of refinement. But then after that, there's a season for a time for everything under heaven. Like every season's not survival, but it's like, when do you realize and recognize, okay, I've got to change my habits though, or I will continue to live in this hurried
I was just so used to living like this.
Absolutely.
And it was just like,
this is what it looks like.
I would get to a free weekend and it made me uncomfortable because it was like, how can I fill it? You know what I mean? But then I would,
there's just like low, like, just like low simmer of guilt of like, we shouldn't just be sitting.
No, we shouldn't just have a free weekend and just like spend that time together.
Yeah.
But then I had like I was realizing I had no bandwidth for being able to, like, if somebody did have a need or there was something that came up, I wasn't able to do that because I was living with so little margin in my life, and I was just surviving. I literally was like just surviving. And so I was like, and so that's been really the like journey of the last couple of years, like maybe year, is like, I don't want to live like that. Like, this is not how I want to live the rest of my life. Like I think I'd written it in here, and I don't take credit for, I think I heard it in a sermon, but I don't know who it was. And so I can't, but the, like, where my competence was outweighing my capacity, right? Like, cause I am a highly competent person. I can grit through and
we all would have quit long before.
Like I am, but I was not thriving. And I was not, like I was going to reach a point where I was going to like totally, burn out. And I don't know that I wasn't able to be like a present like mother. And I, like I wasn't, it was not making decisions that was like, they were not wise, or it was, and so I didn't want to burn out. And it's like, okay, like I can do this, but should I do this, and how to like figure that out? And then instead of being like, just kind of like wishing that I had more time and more like capacity for all of this like stuff, like, okay, what are the steps that I should take towards, and now the book, Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, I mean, it's got some like
radical
things, I mean, like he practices pretty significant minimalism, like 6 outfits, right? And so I'm like, I don't know that that's going to be me, but I also, but if you
5 of them have been spit up on this week.
Exactly, right. Yeah. It's like, that, but do I have way more stuff that I need? And is that taking up a lot of the like mental space that
that's
I have?
That's what I was going to say. Like, I feel like, in my graduating high school, college days, like I was much more legalistic. And so it was like pretty black and white. And so if somebody was like radical, I was like, no, that's not it. And if they're saying that's the gospel, then that's not it. But I've grown to really appreciate radical notions and within reason, within, scriptural context, because it does push you. One, your faith should be radical. It should change the way we live. But 2, it's inspiring of, you just said like, I don't know if that is quite what I can do or should do or have to do. But that does push me and challenge me to what can I do within that realm. And that it does take being ruthless, because culture's not going to say, less is more. Right.
Well, that's exactly it. I mean, that's the premise of the book, is like, this is countercultural. Jesus lived counterculturally, and that was an intentional choice. And, Christians should be living counterculturally. And what does that look like? Right. And that you can make decisions that will make it so that you are not living in just like survival mode. And I think it's better for kids. It's like for sure better for my like spiritual life, like it's, if you feel like you've only got 15 minutes in your day to squeeze a like, quiet time in, I mean, that's really hard to get a lot of benefit out of it and out of, like what scripture like has to say. And I'm not saying you have to have an hour, like often it is, but it's like to feel like you have the space to like do the things that you need to do. And I think that there's just a lot of really good data out there about how this pace that we are living our lives is affecting our kids. When you look at, like the degree of anxiousness, the degree of like suicidality, like a lot of this stuff. And it's like, this is countercultural. And so instead of being like, well, the problem is I just don't have enough time. It's like, well, like you don't have enough, but the solution is not just like, because you can't create more time. And so
Right.
how can you like structure your life, and how can you be doing like intentional things? And it does
Mhm.
include saying no to good things, you
Yeah.
know, and that's what's hard for me. Because if I something I don't want to do, or something that I think
Mhm.
is like not good, I have no problem saying no to that.
Yeah.
But it is very hard for me to say no to things
Mhm.
that are good.
Yeah.
That isn't, this is not a bad thing that
Yeah.
I'm saying no to, but it's like, just like, no, this is not the right time, and I don't have the bandwidth.
Well, and I think sometimes it can be like, well, I don't have anything there. And so it's like, well, it's not that we're saying no to having anything here. It's that I'm saying yes to having this open time with my
Yeah.
family, or I'm
Yeah.
saying yes to having this open time with the Lord. Because even going back to the quiet time thing, yeah, there are seasons where you do have a brand new baby and you physically did not get to open your Bible
Right.
today.
Right.
And so what it looked like for you to worship him with your whole heart was praying while you were up feeding.
Yep.
It looked
Yep.
like, you know, singing a song when you wanted to cry,
Yes,
or
you
what.
made it to church.
Yeah.
Like, congratulations,
Yes,
that's huge,
or
right?
crying,
Yes.
whatever
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
looked like, worship looks like that. But then we get into these seasons where it's like, is that the case, or have your habits created where
Right,
there's only 15
exactly. Right,
minutes?
exactly. Like,
Yeah.
am I
Mhm.
making these choices? And so, like,
Yeah.
again, I'm not advocating for 6
Right.
outfits, but like,
Yeah.
is our stuff,
Yeah.
you know, like, we can have less stuff, and that would
Mhm.
probably make my life a lot easier if I didn't
Yeah.
have to manage some of that stuff.
It would make me do laundry more.
That's true. Yes,
Ah,
that is
but
one
that's
of
a good thing, because then it's not like this mountain that you're
right,
like, "Oh,
right,
yeah,
yeah, right,
we've got clothes."
right.
No, you don't. You have
Yeah,
to do it.
exactly, you have to do this
Yeah.
thing, right?
No. What are some tips that you're like, "Okay, this has really helped me."
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think thinking through the material possessions is
Mhm.
definitely like one, you know,
Yeah.
like I've sort of started purging a lot of
Yeah.
stuff. And I do think like there's just certain amount of, not just the like the space being cleaner, but
Mhm.
also
The
looking,
stewardship.
yeah, yeah. And then, but then on the other hand is like being intentional then about the things that you like get, you
Right.
know, like he talks about, you know, paying attention to, was it ethically sourced? Was it,
Yeah.
is it good quality? You know, like that kind of thing. And so I think, that was, I think
Mhm.
helpful. Um, yeah, he talks a lot about Sabbath,
Mhm.
which it is a topic that so I do not have a well-formed, like, this is how it is, but it's something
Mhm.
that like God, I think, is sort of like, I need to figure out, what does Sabbath look like for us, right?
Yeah.
Because we haven't really done like an
Yeah.
intentional
And
Sabbath. And
even
I
just what does Sabbath look like
what
for us
does
right
right,
now?
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but like I do feel convicted about both what scripture says about Sabbath, and like
Mhm.
reading the book, like I mean, he takes a pretty literal, like 24 hours, he turns off his phone,
Mhm.
like they don't do. But then like the thing is, like, when you talk about what is work, you know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
working in my garden,
Yeah.
I actually really enjoy, and is very life-giving to me,
Yeah.
and I think that, you can get quite legalistic when it comes. I mean, if you look at some
Yeah.
traditions with, a Sabbath, you can get
Mhm.
pretty legalistic about that, and I'm not necessarily advocating for that.
Yeah.
But it's hard for me too, because I work on often on week, like, there is no day of the week that is
It's not like
truly
every
fully,
Saturday we
like, I
can do
cannot just
this.
say
Yeah.
like, because I do work, I have
And you
work.
have preschoolers. Like,
Yes, exactly. Yeah, like keeping them alive is
Yeah.
work, you know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
but I so
Okay, the
he
Lord said,
yeah,
"You
oh
guys gotta
no,
go on
sorry.
Saturday."
Yeah, 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 exactly. Like, yep, okay, bye, you get to go. And I don't have family nearby, so I can't just like send
I
them
feel
somewhere. Yeah.
obviously like everything in scripture comes back to the heart, right?
Right, right.
And so it's like Sabbath, same thing. And the interesting thing is that is one of the things that's found pre-fall, it's found in the law,
Hmm.
it's found in Jesus's life.
Right,
So it's like we see this thread throughout, but obviously it looked different.
right. For
It
sure.
looked different for in the garden, it looked different in the law, but the heart of it was always good
Right.
and always for our good. And I always just think, like you said, gardening's considered work, but it's something that brings me joy.
Hmm.
But I would say for you, like, you're not trying to control or work for Martha Grace's agenda
Right,
when you're gardening.
right.
And so I would consider that your
Yeah,
Sabbath,
yeah.
because it's gratefulness for this time.
Mhm.
You're probably thinking, like, I know for a lot of people that do gardening, like
It's
there's
cathartic, very
it's
cathartic time.
cathartic, and
Yeah.
there's a lot of biblical lessons there.
Hmm.
Like, you're thinking of things,
Hmm. Yep.
different parables that
Yep.
like make more sense
Yeah,
to you,
yeah, yeah,
because
yep, because you're doing that.
and so
Yeah.
it's like it's this honoring of like, I'm not trying to get down my to-do list,
Hmm. Hmm.
I'm enjoying the
Right.
things you've given me.
Exactly.
And there's this gratefulness and this rest in that. Or parenting because that doesn't rest,
Right,
you know?
right. And Izzy likes working with me in the garden, so, like, it
Yeah.
is, yeah,
So
an
sweet.
enjoyable, like, space. So, yeah, so I don't know what exactly Sabbath would look
Mhm.
like. We're
Yeah.
kind of trying to figure out, like, because I think we do a lot of things that are, like, Sabbath-like, but it's not, like, formalized, and so we're kinda trying to figure
Right.
that out. The other thing that he talks quite a bit about that I think is just been very convicting is just,
Mm.
like, media,
Yeah.
like, how, like, our relationship with, like, phones and
Mm.
like TV and shows and electronics and social media and et cetera, and just kind of like rethinking
No, it's
like how
so
that plays a
true.
role.
And even earlier, like I know that you genuinely enjoy connecting with your mom
Hmm.
and miss
Yeah,
her when
yeah,
you
yeah,
haven't talked to her. But there's also, and so I'm not using your mom as an
yeah.
example, but just because you use that, like, I've got this, I didn't get this done, I haven't talked to my mom in a week, and it's
Hmm.
something you want to do. But also I think like we are so accessible that like we're far more accessible than our capacity allows.
Right,
You're
right.
able to be called at all hours. And for your job, that's
I
sometimes
often am.
necessary.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
But for the vast majority of us, and even on your days where you're not on
Right.
call, it isn't.
Right.
And it's like, how do we have this technology and how do we have this accessibility, but not live as unlimited
Right.
creatures,
Right.
which we cannot
Is it
be.
ruling us?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Which it I think often is. And
Yeah.
so, there are the ways that you can limit like what it does.
Mm-hmm.
You can kind of dumb the smartphone. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
again,
Mm-hmm.
he like goes in a pretty
Right.
like more extreme than probably like I would, but
Mm-hmm.
it just it and yeah, but it just it's sort of the reading this book kind of like tagged on to like a lot of
Yeah.
like what I'd been thinking about and
Yeah.
like how like okay, like I keep waiting for life to settle down and it keeps
Yeah.
not settling down, and so
Yeah.
now I am going to make like
Yeah.
intentional steps towards how to do that, because this is
Mhm.
just not how I want to live
Yeah.
my life.
Forever.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I think sometimes like going back to, like yes, it's really radical, but sometimes it's refreshing to know like, oh, that's a possibility. Like I'm
Right.
not crazy or alone
Right. Right.
for wanting to do
Or
this.
selfish.
Mhm.
Because in a lot of ways, it's because I do want to have bandwidth for when there is like something,
Mhm.
like if there's something at church or there's like a need or something like
Yeah.
that where I feel like and again, I don't want to create space just so that we can fill it. Like, cause obviously like that's my
Right.
like initial bent, of course, is like, okay, like free weekend, what are we going to do with it? Right.
Yeah.
But like I want to be able to have the space like to like,
Mhm.
because I was feeling like there's no way we can volunteer. There's no way we can do, I have
Mhm.
no space whatsoever
Yeah.
like to do these things.
Mhm.
Um,
Well, even just like boredom is so
yes.
foundational for kids,
Right, right,
and so
yeah,
it's like creating that space for them to be bored,
mhm,
which is
yeah,
hard,
yeah, yeah,
you
with
know?
all the, like, toys and entertainment.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why you think about material stuff, I got rid of so many toys, and
Yeah.
they not even a dent on the number of toys that we have,
I
but it's
know.
like, it is
Yeah,
okay, to, like, not have
it
to not
is.
be constantly entertained.
Mhm. Yeah. What are you saying, Martha Grace? That cannot be.
I know. Yeah, boredom is good. I remember in our house growing up, you didn't say you were bored because you got put to work real quick if
Uh-huh.
you said that you were bored.
100%. Yes. Okay, well tell us, I know you, speaking of saying no to good things, I know you've got stuff today, so I
Yeah.
don't want to keep you all day, but tell us about a couple of things that you're involved in, just ministry wise,
Yeah.
because I know your faith is like the number one thing in your
Yeah,
life.
yeah, it has been. Yeah, so we've been very involved in our church. We've got a
Yeah.
small group that we've been doing that has been a really positive thing for us. I
Mhm.
would say. I don't know. It was on my list. I hadn't really talked about like how we didn't have a great church
Mm.
community
Yeah.
in med school
Yeah.
and did in residency, and the difference was really like stark, and I don't know
Yeah.
that I realized quite how, because I'd always sort of had like good church homes, and it
Yeah.
wasn't intentional, it just didn't really happen in like med school. Also I was busy studying for a lot of the time,
Yeah.
but anyway, like how
And
important
kind
that
of
was.
probably in no man's land because some
Y-
people are married, some people aren't,
yes,
and
yes,
so it's like, where do
yes,
we?
yeah, for sure. Yeah, churches struggle, I think, with married without kids. That's a definitely like
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
especially like when you're still in some sort of schooling because you're
Right.
like, do we do college? Do we
Right,
not? Do
right,
we
right.
what?
Do we do young adult? But
We
I'm
did
like
that
definitely
same
not a young
thing.
parent, you know what
Yeah.
I mean? So
Yeah.
that was definitely hard. So yeah, so we're very involved with our church. We have a small group that we've really loved. Um, I don't know if you've heard of MOPS or MOMCO.
Yeah.
I don't know if
Hmm.
that's I had not heard of it here, so I don't know if it was like
Yeah,
a
it
thing, if there
is.
is like
Yeah.
around
And
here.
I know they've changed their
Yeah, they
name.
used to be MOPS, and then
Hmm.
because it was mothers of preschoolers, and then I think even though that's what it was for decades, I
Right.
think they felt marketing wise, it sounded like a cleaning club or something like that. And
Mhm,
so
mhm.
now
Well, and
it's
it's like, you know, if you're staying home or you're whatever, it's like, I need shepherding a lot longer than
right,
Facebook.
exactly. So
Yeah.
exactly. So it's now Momco, and then
Yeah.
it's an international organization. It is faith
Mhm.
based.
They just had their conference, didn't they? Like I saw
Yeah, they do
online
in
something.
I think it's in October.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, and it was I don't know where it was this year. I haven't. I mean, I've been involved in our local one. I haven't
Mhm.
gone to like the conference. So that's been I'm part of that
Mhm.
group, and it's if I it very was very much been positive thing to be able to do things with other moms because I don't
Mhm.
usually get to do things with
Yeah.
other moms. Like that is like the hard thing about being
Mhm.
like a working mom. A lot of times it's like on a weekday in the morning
Right.
and now we do meet on a weekday, but we meet on Thursday and as it would have
Yeah.
which is my non-clinic day, right? And so like it's the day that I'm more flexible.
That's
And
so
so
neat.
and they it started the year we moved to Hayward and it was on Thursday. It was like totally a God thing. And so it's been
Wow.
definitely like my community and to be able to both like, in those early like baby days like you've got this, like
Mm.
people like bringing food and being support and whatever, but now it's like that I have a little more bandwidth to be able to be giving back. It's, like I think like moms, especially stay-at-home moms, although again, I'm a working mom and so,
I was gonna
like
say
I think
sometimes that can feel less inclusive for working moms because A, you can't
yeah,
come, and B, it's like, am I gonna be able to relate? Does anyone relate to me? Am I gonna
right.
be able to
Right.
relate? Do people think of me as a lesser?
Right, because you're not like staying
Yeah,
home. Yeah, I mean, we really are. I mean, our group
yeah.
specifically, and I think Momco in general, it really is trying to like
Mm,
moms like whatever their walk of life, and like
yeah.
how can we like support you in like this work that you're
Mm,
doing,
yeah.
and so that's been I've been part of it and on the leadership. This is probably my last year doing leadership, but it's been a very very positive thing, and I just
Yeah.
think that um I don't know if there's one here locally, but I think it's
We
a really
have
good
groups, but I
yeah.
think they don't pay for their name anymore.
Oh,
It's
sure,
like at
like
our
their
church,
own.
it's called Mom Time,
Sure, yeah,
but
yes,
it
yeah, because
originated
there
as
is you do
moms.
have to pay to like
Yeah.
the, the internet, although it's not a
Mhm.
ton of money, but it's like something, and they do have like materials and stuff. Like I think there's benefit to the like,
Absolutely, yeah.
to the because I think it's a really solid organization. So that's been
Mhm.
something, been nice to be able to be like feeling like I'm giving back. Because for a
Mm,
lot of years I just felt like I was getting, and just like not able to like give back because I was just
yeah.
like in med school and residency. And then there's something called Christian Medical Dental Association, which my parents
Mhm.
have both been very involved with, and then there's a women's branch, which is Women Physicians and Dentists in Christ.
Mhm.
And mom is still very involved. She's not on leadership anymore, and I've been on the leadership for that
That's
since
so
I was
neat.
in residency. And so that's like it's cool to be part of an organizational, internet,
Yeah.
like a national, like a bigger organization, getting
Yeah.
learning a lot of things about how that kind of thing
Mhm.
works. But to be able to like work with like other women who are, Christian women physicians. It's just like it's very
Very
niche,
specific,
but like
yeah.
it's like there's a set of, like to be able to be around people who really kind of get, like where you're
Yes.
at. And like there's, pulls with being a mom, there's pulls with being a physician, and it just often feels like those are antithetical to each other,
Yeah.
and so like having that support, and I really appreciate it as an organization. So yeah, I mean, I would say that those are like the big things that I'm doing outside of,
Absolutely.
yeah.
No, that's huge. I love that you've found those organizations to be a part of, like, yes, your community group, but also
Hmm.
these things because we just can downplay the need that we have for a sense of belonging or,
Hmm.
especially, I think sometimes like if we can reason it, we won't do it.
Hmm.
If we can
Yep.
reason like, well, yeah, I know I need that, but I'm fine,
Yep. Yep.
and but you just there is just something that you can't necessarily define about this community and just the the gift of being understood,
Hmm.
of the me too, of like when you say like I'm just feeling really torn, me too.
Yep.
You're not having to advocate this new need. They see it, you see it, and there's just something beautiful about that,
Right. Especially because when you can see, because it's like the number of times that people are like, well, they feel like they're just surviving, and you look at them and you're like, you don't seem like you're just surviving. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like you seem to be rocking
it's like
this.
you're
But
killing it.
yeah, like to speak that into somebody's like life,
Right.
is like always really,
It
uh,
is.
helpful because it's like, no, like your kids are thriving. Like you're not, abandoning,
Yes.
your kids. You're doing, like you're doing a good job.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, Martha Grace, I mean, I'm sure there are things that we didn't hit, but it was so good. Thank you for sharing
Yeah.
it with
Yeah.
us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, thank you for coming on your break. Here you are saying yes, and you absolutely could have said no, so we really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me.
Thank
I
you so
appreciate it.
much. It was fun.
Yeah.
And thank y'all so much for listening in this week on the Saltworks. We'll see you next week.
This is my story. This is your story.